Today I will be sharing about IMA resolution of ethical conduct, and I read the article about James Alderson, an accountant for a big hospital, who was asked to make a separate set of books for the expenses of the hospital. The, the ploy of the hospital was to get as much reimbursement from the government as they could from the expenses, and to keep two sets of books, one with more realistic versions of the expenses that they'd keep for internal use, and a second one that they'd submit to the government to get as much money as they could. When Mr. Alderson was presented with this, he refused and was later forced out of his job. Now, the IMA resolution of ethical conduct suggests that when faced with an ethical dilemma, that you go to your immediate supervisor. If your immediate supervisor is involved, then you talk to their supervisor. Mr. Alderson didn't really have a chance to do any of that. He was forced out of his job and had to get a job somewhere else. Later, however, he did talk to some administrators at the hospital about the problem. One of those administrators was Mr. Jessup, and when Mr. Alderson explained the situation, Mr. Jessup, who is a former administrator of the hospital, agreed that it sounded very fraudulent of the hospital to do. And so, according to the IMA, it's important to discuss these ethical issues with either a member of the IMA or an impartial advisor to understand the possible courses of action. And that's what Mr. Alderson did. He went to someone else and presented the information, and they confirmed that, he was right to refuse that request. It was wrong. This administrator was also able to refer Mr. Alderson to a case in California that was similar to what he was facing. With that in mind, Mr. Alderson dove into that case and learned as much as he could so he could be prepared and understand what he could do. And with that information, he knew the actions of the hospital were fraudulent, and he decided to contact the U.S. government, which is in line with IMA guidelines, to only contact authorities like law authorities if you know there was a violation and it was pretty clear there was fraud. The last step is to consult an attorney, and Mr. Alderson consulted many and ended up hiring one that was specialized in this sort of case that he was facing. And with that, he kept this whole process under wraps. He didn't tell anyone except his wife and children, and they helped keep it a secret so that word of what he was doing wouldn't get out. According to Badraco, a quiet leader can be very valuable due to their patience. It isn't all about one big heroic moment. Mr. Alderson didn't run into the local police officers' building and declare that the hospital was committing fraud. Instead, he was patient. He gathered information and learned about what he could do to bring justice in this case. And that is what a quiet leader does. They're patient. They will bide their time, and won't be hasty. And due to his patience, the government got involved and was able to confront this hospital and make things right.